Good evening to you both, and let's begin on the federal election front. We heard from Liberal Eleanor Olszewski off the top tonight, the first of the candidates we aim to hear from in the riding of Edmonton Centre. Karen, this riding has been hotly contested over the past several elections, going both Liberal and Conservative. What kind of race do you see brewing here, especially considering incumbent Randy Boissonnault dropped off the ballot in the 11th hour?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a tight race. Having someone step in for the Liberals kind of at a late hour is going to really make it more difficult to gain ground. The Liberal candidate has, her name is well known in Edmonton, so hopefully that will be in her favor in terms of running her campaign. But the Conservatives are going to campaign really hard. They don't want to give up any ground in Alberta, and it's going to be a contentious race. And then, of course, the NDP is going to position themselves as, neither of those two choices. Please come and take a look at us.
The NDP candidate has also been door knocking, I'm to understand, for about a year and a half, so has a little bit of ground covered there. But Archie, how challenged do you think the Liberals will be to retain an Edmonton Centre foothold?
Well, this riding is always very hard fought, and it's for some of the reasons that Karen mentioned there. It falls entirely within the city boundaries. So although Edmonton, of course, has strong federal Conservative support, there's lots of pockets of both Liberal and NDP support. And there were rumors, of course, that Mark Carney might consider running in this riding. He is from Edmonton, and there were rumors about that. But my guess is that they showed that it's too close a riding. There's no guarantee that the Liberals or anyone else will win this riding. I think it'll be close. I think one of the things I'll be keeping an eye on, Karen mentioned the NDP, is, these campaigns often track with the local candidates, yes, but more strongly with what's happening in the federal campaign. And so far, one of the big stories of the federal campaign has been this cratering of NDP support. And, this is a strong riding for the NDP. They've nominated Tricia Estabrooks, a strong candidate. Jagmeet Singh has been in Edmonton, but the party overall is not doing very well. So the NDP may struggle in this riding. The Liberals have a good chance, but so do the Conservatives. So it's just going to be a very interesting riding to watch.
Karen, the election definitely dominating the national news cycle, especially considering response to the Trump tariff dynamic. But how do you see campaigns resonating at the local candidates level anywhere in Alberta?
Well, I think the most important things to people, regardless of if it's a provincial campaign or a federal campaign, how affordable is life right now? And tariffs are a really big part of that. It's concerning that tariffs can have such a big negative impact on our economy. So I assume that, candidates are going to be hearing a lot about that and want to know how, if you form government, how is your government going to approach that? And how is that going to affect me? How is that going to affect my family? Are we going to have to worry about a recession, about layoffs? Tell me what you're going to do to advocate for me and to cushion the blow.
Archie, we're midway through the second week of the election. To what degree are you seeing either candidate or party election signs popping up in local neighborhoods? And what is that a sign of?
Well, it feels like things have been a little slow to get rolling on the campaign sign front. And I think some of that is, who was ready to go for the election and who wasn't. Some of the Conservative candidates have run before and they can pull their signs out of the garage and put them up. And indeed, in some of the ridings here in Calgary, we've seen Conservative signs go up. But the Liberals have not nominated candidates in some ridings. They're just getting around to doing that now. And so I think, I think signs are just one indication of support. They're certainly not the only one these days. But I think locally speaking, I think the campaigns are really just starting to get up and running now.
Karen, Calgary media reporting today that 8 of the city's 11 ridings have a full slate of candidates. Surprised some parties are still playing catch up?
I think that's a great question. I think we see that with every campaign. It's hard to get that many candidates ready to go. And as we've seen with some parties, they've had to make changes at the last minute. They've had to withdraw candidates for different reasons. It seems like the Liberals have a slower mechanism for withdrawing their candidates, where the CPC is able to do that quite agilely. And then, of course, it takes longer to be able to get a candidate into one of those ridings where somebody's been removed. So I think their process might be robust, but it's also a bit of a deterrent, a problem for them at this juncture.
Archie, how competitive are you expecting Calgary ridings to be this time around?
Well, if I had to guess on the nomination front, that asking people to run for the Liberals is a lot easier, say, this week or last week than it would have been a month ago or 2 months ago when Justin Trudeau was still leading the party. So I think that there is an upswing. I mean, people can read the national polls, and it seems like Carney is in the lead right now by quite a strong margin. And so, Calgary is not going to suddenly, go Liberal, but there are going to be some ridings that are suddenly a little more in play and a little more enticing for candidates. So the national polls have a big factor in these things, and there's probably 3 or 4 ridings in the city here that could conceivably go Liberal, but there's a lot of campaign left, I'd say.
With the clock ticking on American tariffs, the Premier took aim Tuesday at the results of a new poll surveying retaliatory measures.
I think it's a garbage poll.
Whenever politicians don't like my numbers, they always say that they don't like the poll. That's fine.
The Nanos poll found 77% of Canadians support or somewhat support an export tariff on oil and natural gas and electricity that's sold south of the border in retaliation for American tariffs. In the prairies, the support figure falls to just under 59%. Archie, I'll start with you first this time. We in Alberta know the Smith government is dead set against the application of an export tax on oil and gas. There's fear of retaliation against an industry hugely important to our province. But what's your read on why many Canadians may not see things the same way as Danielle Smith?
Well, look, Danielle Smith, I think, is right in the sense that we should carefully weigh any sort of retaliatory tariffs before we impose them. They might provoke reaction. But at the same time, we only have so many bargaining chips with the United States right now. And our energy is one of our main bargaining chips. And so to take that off the table right now just seems unnecessary and takes away some of the leverage that we do have. And people like Jason Kenney have been making this argument, and people like Stephen Harper as well. We're facing this threat from Trump. We're facing tariffs today, the threat of tariffs. And, Danielle Smith seems more outraged at Ottawa than she does at Washington. And to me, it feels like a bit of a misreading of the public mood. Certainly, it's a misreading of the public mood across the country. But even here in Alberta, I think people are more concerned about an erratic United States and an erratic United States leader and what it might mean for Canada, I think more so than the threat of an election that may not go the way the Alberta government wants.
Karen, what's to be made of the Premier calling the Nanos poll garbage, as opposed to maybe responding to what Canadians are reflecting in the poll results?
I think often politicians will try to discredit sources of information that don't support their narrative. And this poll does not support what the Premier has been talking about. Unfortunately, this is a situation where our leadership does not have a lot of control over what's happening. And so I think Canadians instinctively understand we have control over tariffs. That is something that we can use to leverage our position, hopefully to our advantage, or to at least inflict a little bit of damage onto what is now, used to be a friend, is now a foe.
Archie, how much do you see this boiling down to the levers available to the federal government and whether or not there is political license to actually use those levers?
Well, again, I think there's a lot of ifs, and that's one of the things about dealing with Donald Trump is we don't really know what Donald Trump is going to do next, and we don't know, therefore, what our response should be. And so that's why, I don't think our first move should be anything like approaching, retaliatory tariffs on energy. But again, it may be something that we want to look at down the road. And so I don't think it's helpful for the Alberta Premier to be out saying we would never, ever, ever do this because it might be something we want to do in the future. Again, not necessarily. And I think it is true that some people in Eastern Canada maybe have not thought through these ramifications properly, but taking it off the table just seems silly to me.
Okay, one more topic, and that's Alberta Health Services rescinding a policy that could have cut off food service to many patients in hospital. AHS was planning to reduce the list of food items supplied in outpatient areas, and parents of some cancer patients were told that would include comfort treats like popsicles and drinks for children undergoing treatment at the Alberta Children's Hospital. On Tuesday morning, the interim CEO of AHS paused the policy. Karen, it was a social media post made by the mom we just heard from that drew this contentious policy into the spotlight at the beginning of the week. Where do you weigh in on how this whole dialogue played out?
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? First of all, AHS hasn't had a hold on the messaging, and it makes me wonder if it's a case of malicious compliance where there was a directive coming down from above, and it was really adhered to, like to the nth degree, where it ended up impacting patient care negatively. In terms of overall, I think it would take some digging to understand what was the original purpose of the policy. If we look at healthcare, food, hospital food across the world, Canada, Alberta, we don't usually come up very well. And so to further reduce something so important for somebody's medical treatment, nourishment, you need to be well nourished to have successful treatment. I think AHS has really fumbled on this, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Archie, what's to be made of the reversal of policy response, and who should wear it?
Well, I think it's true that, whatever the intent of the policy was, when it comes down to when we're depriving kids in cancer care of their popsicles and ginger ale, then it is a bungled rollout. And I truly don't know what they were trying to do, but there's all this communication, the execution of it, the differing explanations for what went on suggests that they don't really know in this case what they're doing. And it just suggests that there's confusion in this big reorganization that they're undergoing in healthcare. I think from the outside, they'd like it to look as if everything is proceeding, in order and perfectly, and that they're looking for cost savings where they can find them. But when you see this sort of thing, you can see behind the curtain a little bit that maybe things aren't actually working as well as they'd like, and that some of the ideas that sound good as policy don't necessarily look so good when they make their way down to patients. Because in the end, that's what this is about, is patient care. Maybe we don't want to give bagged lunches to everyone who shows up in the ER, but we don't want to be taking away, popsicles and pop for kids who are trying to get better. So I hope that they can. I'm glad they shifted gears on this one, but I think it does suggest that there's something deeper going on.
Karen, is this for AHS to wear, or is there a political level involved here as well?
Without a lot of digging, it's hard to tell. I think regardless of what the outcome, whatever conclusions are drawn, AHS will wear this, especially when you hear the messaging coming from the Premier being kind of at odds. This is temporary. This isn't permanent. We're going to go back to that policy. So it sounds like there's a political bent to it. And it really does seem kind of penny wise but pound foolish to try and save money and maybe make a product attractive, I don't know, by taking away things like Archie said, popsicles and ginger ale.
Archie, how likely is this to be a peek inside the window of what is to come with the overhaul of Alberta's healthcare system?
Well, again, it does suggest some level of disarray just in how this was announced and how it played out in the ground. But sometimes, this sort of thing, this sort of callousness and cruelty, or what it looks like callousness and cruelty, really does undermine public trust in the system. People are going to say, well, what are my other options for care? Because the people looking after me don't seem to care very much. So I worry about what this does overall to the confidence in the public health system. And, it also makes me wonder if maybe that's the point. If people aren't getting the care they need in the public system, they'll look for other ways in the private sector to get that sort of care. So I don't think this has made the government look very good at all, no matter what their intent was.
All right. We'll have to leave it there for time. Good to see you both. Thank you kindly for this.
Thank you.